Hello everyone. In this particular video I'm going to talk about a very short topic, which is assertion. Assertion is just like the exception handling which you have done in the previous video. So let's go through it. Assertion is just a statement in Java. As you can see, it is used to just test your assumptions about a program. If your assumption goes wrong, then the runtime error will be generated, just like you throw an exception object. Similarly, the assertion error will be thrown. So while executing assertion, it is believed to be true. That's what I said. If the assertion goes false, your assumption goes false, then this kind of assertion error will be generated at runtime by the JVM. So JVM will throw an error at runtime whose name is assertion error. Okay, so this is an inbuilt one, assertion error. It is just used for testing purpose. It is just used for testing purpose or debugging purpose only. Okay, not for the actual exception handling. Okay, it is not used for exception handling. It's just used for testing purpose. Okay, so its syntax is, you have to use the keyword assert, and the expression which you want to test for the truth value. Does this expression holds true or not? Assert with the expression means assumption about the expression. Is my assumption true? Then no error will be thrown at runtime. If the assumption goes false, then runtime error will be thrown. Let's try to understand this with the help of an example. Let's say I'm asking the user to enter the age. User enters the age in a variable. Okay, now I want to test this variable for truth value. Have a look. I'll just write assert value is greater than equal to 18. Assert value is greater than equal to 18 means assume that value is greater than equal to 18. If this assertion, the assumption goes false, then a runtime error, which is the assertion error, will be generated by the JVM. So let's have a look. This is the output I've already shown you. Enter your age. Let's say the user enters 11. So this kind of exception will be thrown at runtime. java.lang.assertion error, and you can also print the message not valid. This one, that's optional. Whether you want to print the message or not, that's purely optional. Okay, so you just have to write assert this one. So how does it differ from the exception handling? It differs from exception handling in such a way that assertions are not enabled by default in Java. Okay, so whenever you run the program, even if the assertion goes false, okay, they are not going to generate you error. They are just used for debugging purpose. Okay, so let me tell you by executing one of the program here. But before executing the program, have a look. How will I compile it? Java C, the file name .java, and in order to run it, Java space -EA -EA. EA means enable assertions. Either you write this full line, enable assertions, or you just write this short form -EA. -EA or -enable assertions. Okay, because if you do not write this particular thing, assertions are by default disabled in Java, and hence even if this particular line goes true or false, no error is going to be generated. So clearly indicates that it is just used for testing purpose. Okay, if you try to run this program in any of the IDEs like Eclipse or NetBeans, the assertions are not going to work because they are disabled by default. And whenever you just deploy your program, let's say this is your whole program, your whole package, your whole application which you want to deploy to the client, the assertions will never be activated. Okay, so don't worry about this line. So I have written this line, runtime error will be generated if the value goes, if the assumption goes false, like if I try to enter the value 11 or something below 18, then this particular message will be thrown and my program will quit in the middle. That's not going to happen because they are disabled by default. Okay, they can be enabled only at the debugging time. So let's have a look. So I've already written a program here for you where I'm asking the user to enter his age, and I'm just saying assert age greater than 18. Okay, assert means assumption. Assume that, I'm telling the compiler, assume that the variable value is greater than 18. If that is not true while executing my program, so this particular line should generate a runtime error called assertion error, so that I get to know that something goes wrong in my calculation. I should rectify my calculation. Okay, so assertion, main purpose of assertion is this one, just for debugging purpose. If anything goes wrong in my calculation while I'm writing hundreds of lines of code, my calculation goes wrong somewhere in the middle, so inform me by generating an error, but do not inform me while I actually deploy my program to the client. So this assertion is never going to work when I deploy my program, so you don't need to worry about this. So let's try to compile and execute. I open the command prompt. I have already saved it on the desktop, this particular file. So let's compile it. File name .java. Okay, and let's execute it. First of all, I'll show you the assertions are disabled by default. I am not using -ea or -ea. They are by default disabled. So let's see. Enter your age. I enter 23. Okay, so assertion never worked because this line assumption is true. So let's execute one more time. Enter your age. Now I enter 9. So if my assumption goes false, still the error is not generated from here because assertions are disabled by default. So you don't need to worry when you deploy your program here because they are disabled by default. This is just used for debugging purpose. Okay, so now let's enable it. I just write -ea. Okay, now I try to run. Now I have enabled this assertion. Let's first of all enter the value 23, and it doesn't give me any error. Assumption is true. Let's try to run one more time and enter the age. Now I say 9, and assertion error is generated at this point, and rest of the line of code did not work. It is just like exception handling key. Wherever the thing goes wrong, break the program, crash the program. Okay, it's not actually crashing here. It is just telling me, okay, something goes wrong, I'm quitting the program right here. Okay, so this is the main purpose of assertion. So if you enable it, only then it is going to work, otherwise it's never going to work. Okay, so the last question here is that I can do the same work with the exception handling logic as well. Like I could write if age greater than 18, in that case throw new, let's say, illegal argument exception. Yeah, you can do that, but the main difference is this particular line which I have highlighted will always and always execute. Means this is not disabled by default. So if your age goes wrong, if your age goes below 18, so it is always going to throw an error for you. Okay, so you don't use these kind of things for debugging purpose, because if you use, instead of assertion, if you use these kind of statements and assume that you have written thousands of lines of code and you're using, instead of assertion, you're using exception handling like this, okay, inform me through exception handling, then there is a hassle that you have to omit these lines wherever you have written, so that they do not come into your actual product when you're going to deploy your product. Okay, so this is a big hassle. So that's why instead of throwing an exception for debugging purpose, we actually use the assertion lines, so that we do not have to delete these lines when we are going to deploy our product. Okay, so because they are not going to harm your product, they're never going to execute. Okay, so that's the main purpose. And the last thing, have a look at the last example now. One more example where I'm just taking a static input Okay, 5.4, I'm asking the user to enter the length value here, and I'm just making a random calculation here, and I'm just saying that okay, assume that the result whatever is calculated here, if it is less than 650, assume that the result is going to be less than 650. If that is true, then do nothing, means do not generate an error for me at runtime. If this particular assumption goes false, then generate an error for me. Okay, so in these kind of assumptions you can use the assertion, okay, instead of exception handling, because you do not have to remove these lines of code when you're going to deploy your product. This is just used for debugging purpose. Okay, so you can pause this video again, and or you can see this video again to if you are unable to understand this assertion logic, but I recommend try to execute it yourself. You will find the difference between the assertion and the exception handling, difference between that. Okay, I hope you like my video. So if you understand the concept, do like it, and that's it.